You in an interview with Bill Moyers, you were
Hmm.
discussing an encounter in your university where a student and actually let me just read it here because I have it here. And you were speaking in context of President Obama and his approach to change, and you're saying that you recalled an incident in a seminar in Black American political thought with a young woman who was a senior and said something in class, and you
Yep.
just blurted out, and essentially she was saying that they came to the point of the civil rights movement was so that they could go to these elite universities and they could go and be a part of the top 1%. And you said that you gave the example that if Viola Luiso knew that that would be the punchline and that that would be the
Right.
purpose of her sacrifice and her death, that she may have stayed at home. The question that I want to ask is particularly in the context of African Americans, but also more broadly in people who are working for progress. How do we not fall into the trap? And this is an ambiguous question, but take the pieces of it that you want to. How do we not fall into that trap of success, where the expectation is that everything that we're fighting for is simply to get a bigger piece of the pie without anyone
Right.
ever looking at how that pie is pieced together being problematic?
Right. Well, no, I mean that's another good question. And by the way, she didn't essentially say that. She said it exactly. It's just why I blurted out the response that I did. I was just kind of so taken aback by it, and it was specifically to go to Yale and then go to work for Morgan Stanley, basically. But well, I mean, look, here's the thing. I think one thing that we have to do, and I think this is another problem, like with anti-racist discourse and the ways that and really all the identity discourses, and the way that they sort of perfume class dynamics, that um, that we've got to start treating um, black political dynamics, and you can say the same thing about Latinos and the other interest groups, as something special that's immune to or exists outside of the class dynamics that shape American politics more generally. Um, here's a specific, and I mean this is something I've written when you recently. I hope will be out within a year or so. I trust. But in in thinking about what's happened in Black urban politics since the Voting Rights Act, right? A number of years ago, actually 28 years ago, I did an article that was fairly widely read, like in academic circles. That was an examination of what we call the Black urban regime. And I was on a panel at a conference a couple of years ago where the respondents or the panelists kind of challenged me in a non-combative way, to revisit that argument and asked how I would change or update it, which I thought was a really good and useful thing to do. So I did it, and what I've seen, and I admit, like a lot of it is based on the case study of New Orleans. For quirky reasons, I've got a lot of inroads into the black political class there for a long time.
Mhm.
But what you see is what you would expect to see, right? So now we've had black people going to the same elite institutions that their white peers go to for 40, 50 years
Mhm.
now. Their kids are have gone to the same institutions. They live in the same neighborhoods. They have the same cultural tastes, same consumer preferences. They buy the same stuff. They like the same coffee shops. They have the same hierarchies of consumption preferences and senses of what a good neighborhood is and what a good school is, and so forth and so on.
Mhm.
What what's been developing isn't, and see, this is one of the reasons that I don't like constructs like the Miss Leadership class. All I count Glenn Ford as a friend and have the utmost respect for his critical voice, or notions that they're selling out the interest of the black community, whatever. Because what's actually happening when we think about it in kind of really sociologically neutral terms, is that what's emerged from these dynamics, and this is one of the victories of the civil rights movement on the terms that we wanted, is that at the local level and to some extent the national level, what we've got is a more or less biracial or interracial governing class now, right? That they have the same commitments, right? I mean, and the black ones are race conscious, and they're also committed to diversity and multiculturalism and cosmopolitanism, but they're race conscious. They're as race conscious as anybody else. In fact, that I mean, statistically, they're even more likely to be race conscious than the working class black people. And there's this sense that my colleague Michael Dawson, I made this argument back in the 90s, in the mid 90s, that as you move up the income and education ladder, black people become more race conscious. And he saw this as an anomaly, right? Because it didn't seem to comport with modernization theory. But if you consider the possibility that race consciousness is a class program, then it makes all the sense in the world that the richer you are, the more race conscious that you're likely to be, because the more likely it is that your social position is in some way or another connected with what I've been calling, for want of anything better, the race relations management industry, right?
Yeah.
Both in the public and private world. Well, a good friend of mine who was also at the University of Chicago and did a bid as deputy provost for diversity. He told me after he got in it for a while, he realized there's a multi-billion-dollar industry out there pimping. The diversity thing, right? Corporate, private sector, public sector, whatever. So what's happened is that what we should expect to happen, right? That once formal racial barriers decline or are eliminated, and barriers to pursuit of a meritocratic ideal of equality of opportunity, which after all is what a wing of the civil rights movement or a node of the civil rights movement was always principally interested in, once that victory is won, then what's going to happen over time is that race doesn't disappear, certainly, and race consciousness doesn't disappear, but race consciousness takes class forms and forms that are consistent with the class connections and the class world that these people live in. So that's why, like, for instance, after Katrina, when Mitch Landrieu was elected mayor, the first white mayor since his father was mayor in the 70s, and when the black majority was lost on the city council, there was a lot of caterwauling, like, all over the country. And this was around the same time that a white woman was challenging Kasim Reed for the mayoralty in Atlanta, which turned out to be a close race. Yeah. But there's a lot of pulling of hair and tearing of clothes and gnashing of teeth all over the country about this loss of black power. And I kept saying, well, I don't see how anything's going to change, right? Like, the local ruling class has made clear that they're satisfied with the current arrangements. I mean, they're getting everything they want out of it. And like in New Orleans in particular, like, you also got the way that race is connected with the heritage tourism industry. Nobody really wanted to upset the apple cart. Yeah. And it's not even just an instrumental thing, right? I mean, it's not unreasonable to consider that blacks, whites, and Latinos in that class share commitments to a lot of the same ideals, like multiculturalism and diversity, right? They want to send their kids to diverse schools. They want to, live in neighborhoods that they would like to think are diverse, although ironically, it's the professional and managerial strata who actually live the most segregated lives in America. And I think that's one of the reasons that they're so formally committed to a discourse of diversity, because it's part of being able to convince themselves that they're so much better than those benighted white working class people out there. So
go ahead.
So anyway, yeah.
and actually, so you actually reminded me of something that you said in your piece on Rachel Dolezal, and I'll let you go, but I just want to read this, where you said identity politics is not an alternative to class politics. It is a class politics, the politics
Right.
of the left wing of neoliberalism. It is the expression and the active agency of a political order and moral economy in which capitalist market forces are treated as unassailable nature. So essentially, I shouldn't be surprised by this phenomenon because it is part and parcel of the entire construct of using race as a type of class
Right.
politic. Wow.
Well, yeah, and look, I think like the last 12 months have like underscored, that argument like a dozen times, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right, because the Democratic primary race could not have made that clearer.